Good morning to you. Mark Stott with HurricaneTrack.com. Here, Hurricane Outlook and Discussion time. It is Monday, the 9th of August, 2021, and we are going to start the week off very busy as the tropics start to come to life here. We saw this coming. The favorable pattern was going to be moving into the Atlantic Basin, and this first graphic that I'm going to show you after the title screen here will really prove that point. You ready? Here we go. This is the EPS, the Ensemble Prediction, the Ensemble of the Euro, the EPS, the Ensemble Prediction System, all the tropical cyclone tracks over the next 10 days or so, 51 different members, most of them showing some kind of activity in 3 distinct areas, maybe even 4. This is 94L. 93L comes and goes through the Caribbean here, another system that comes off Africa. Very busy over the next 10 days, and this only gets us out to about August 20th or so, roughly. So 10 days from now would be the 19th. We can just round it up and call it the 20th. Why do I mention that? Because typically August 20th is thought of as the traditional start to the major climatological ramping up of activity. So if we see 1 or 2 storms between now and then we will still continue to be above average for overall production of storms, the ACE score, the accumulated cyclone energy, and just ahead of the overall climatological pattern. In other words, busier than August is typically supposed to be. And again, this is no surprise. We saw this coming as far back as March and April with the larger climate signals from the models such as the Euro and the UK Met with their seasonal guidance. And here it is coming to fruition. So now that we have sort of the background state being favorable, what's going on out there? Well, in the Atlantic, this red X, invest area 94L, 70% chance of development here, and it's possible that we get a depression or a tropical storm out of it. I think it's much more likely now than I was thinking a couple of days ago. Things are starting to settle into place, and one of these monsoon trough systems is starting to take shape. Remember, we talked about that they were all kind of competing with each other, and it would be kind of a matter of which one, if any, were to kind of take over. And this front runner, 94L, looks like it's going to be the one. So right now it's east of Barbados, moving off to the west-northwest, generally speaking. And the Hurricane Center mentioning that tropical storm watches or warnings could be required today with shorter than normal lead times for portions of the Lesser Antilles, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. So what's going to happen with this? Well, we'll get into that to the best of our ability, especially considering that it's early. We don't have a named storm yet, so we're not going to delve into the modeling too much. So there's 94. This is 93. And we got to watch this one because as we go and expand out to the 5-day graphic, certainly 94L coming up through here, a problem for the Antilles, the lesser and the greater. And then this one could sneak in and try to develop over here later on. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. And a big reason behind that, even though this is yellow there, 93L, we're getting into a more favorable pattern each and every hour. The pattern and overall the background state is becoming more favorable because the Madden-Julian oscillation is sliding into the Atlantic Basin out of the Pacific. The Pacific's going to stay busy, but apparently the Atlantic Basin is going to kind of join the party, if you will, and start producing activity. And some of these systems could develop quicker, closer to home, so to speak. Whose home? Your home, my home, who knows? But that's the way things are going. We might not have them developing way out in the Atlantic where we have days and days and days to track them. That's coming later. As the pattern adjusts, these systems are going to start to develop later in the period rather than early. But then as everything goes on and we get into the latter part of August into September and climatology kind of kicks in, then I think we'll see these long track systems where they develop early on and we have days and days and days to track them. Whereas with these two, I think they're going to develop. I mean, look, this one's just off of Barbados. And remember what happened with Elsa. Barbados got slammed. Lots of flooding, high wind, hurricane force wind down there, as well as parts of the rest of the Windward Islands, Elsa affected. And the same kind of thing here. This is kind of a late bloomer, and it's going to do so as it's moving into the Caribbean. And that brings problems because people maybe aren't paying as much attention to it. Some people get fixated on something having a name first, or if it's not a hurricane, they don't pay attention to it, and that can be problematic. Looking at the satellite imagery, lots of stuff going on. As I said, the Pacific staying busy. This is Kevin, Tropical Storm Kevin. This is another disturbance that's going to develop. Good news is both of these are going to stay off the coast of Mexico. And so still no major impacts for our friends down there in Mexico from either of these systems. And then here's 94L. Now it's interesting. Look at the size of Tropical Storm Kevin, the overall cloud structure, and then look at the satellite picture here. It's the same picture, but you see the noticeably smaller 94L. It's not like this is distorted or whatever. Yes, Kevin is bigger. This one is smaller. Why is that? There's more dry air through here, limiting the ability of deep thunderstorms to develop. So this system here, 94L, is going to be smaller. Terrible arrow there, but you get the idea. So let's just zoom in on it. This will help. This is why I did this, courtesy of the weathernerds.org site. So a couple things that I'm noticing. A little bit more in the way of some bands trying to form right there. There's another one over here, but it still has a kind of blob look to it. Definitely better organized than it was yesterday. More clustering of convection in here, showers and thunderstorms. But it still has sort of this blobby look to it, and it's not quite banded yet. And until and unless it does so, it won't have a chance to strengthen quickly. That being said, strengthen is all a relative term to me. We need to think about impacts. And one of the big goals that I have in this business of mine is educating people not only about what's out there and sort of the hype behind it. I know it gets exciting. People, and I don't mean exciting in a good way. It's inherently exciting that this is out there. It gets people's attention. So outside of that part, the news-making side, the headline side, what's the science behind it? What are the impacts behind it? What can you expect? And based on my 25 years of experience with this kind of stuff, I'm here to help you with that. And so we look at this and you say, well, it's not very well organized just yet. It's getting there. What are the impacts from it? Well, look at this. There's some yellow speckles in there from time to time that represents lightning from the GOES 16 lightning detector, for the lack of a more sophisticated way to put it. So it's got some heavy thunderstorms from time to time. Certainly some gusty winds within those thunderstorms, especially if one develops right over you. So as this moves closer and closer to Barbados today, within the next few hours, you're going to get some heavy rain down there. That leads to flooding. All right, so it doesn't have to be strong to bring strong impacts to you. And when we think of strong, we think generally of wind and pressure. All right, but I need you to think of it from a rain impact as well. And rain is a big problem if there's too much of it in too short a time, or if it's falling over high terrain, and then you have gravity against you, so to speak, because that rain does what? It runs downhill. It fills up these gullies and guts and streams, as they call it down there, depending on the local tradition, and you can get some flash flooding. All right? So small craft, small sailboats down there, people on jet skis, people enjoying the cabanas, the beach umbrellas, you name it. It's very serious. This is going to bring impacts. It's imminent, first in the Barbados region, and then eventually this whole mess. Look how big it is. It's smaller than we see in the eastern Pacific right now because of the dry air limiting its convective potential, but this is still a fairly sizable system compared to these smaller islands of the Caribbean. You understand? So this whole envelope of energy, and then even moisture and other thunderstorms around it, that's all going to move through. So you're going to have problems just depending on where you are and what kind of structure this has as it goes through. So just be mindful of that. I'm going to pound that until I am retired and done with this career, that there's more to it than just wind and pressure and surge. All right? Here's what it looks like on the vorticity signature getting stronger. In that sense, it's showing up better. It's better defined. More energy out there behind it, and even more coming off Africa off the screen here. This is the new system developing in the Pacific. This is Kevin. And here, too, you can see Tropical Storm Kevin's envelope of vorticity larger than what we see here with 94L. And again, that is because of the dry air that surrounds it, limiting its ability. So it's going to have an opportunity to strengthen quickly if it can find favorable conditions. It'll be a small system in aerial coverage, but it could ramp up quickly and bring some nasty conditions, tropical storm conditions, maybe hurricane force wind gusts. That's not out of the realm of possibility, especially in higher elevations. Certainly the stage is set here for this to bring some impacts. One thing going in its favor, if you will, is the upper ocean heat content. Right now the tropical system is located generally in this box. And what do we see there? Well, it's firmly within sort of the middle area of the upper ocean heat content scale, meaning simply it has plenty of upper ocean heat to work with. The water is warm not only at the surface, but in this case, perhaps several hundred meters deep, and is going to be generally moving into the direction of even higher ocean heat content values if land doesn't put a stop to it first. That'll be interesting to see how that evolves. I thought it would be also interesting to compare. This is 2021, August 8th, and this is what it looked like a year ago, almost to the day. So yeah, 2020, what are the differences? The deep tropical Atlantic, a little bit warmer last year overall, and higher ocean heat content values. Just as a curiosity here, an interesting side note, this year, watch right here, warmer in the Gulf of Mexico, or at least more heat content than we had last year. And that's concerning, because if these systems come in and they don't develop, and they develop late like Harvey did, or Laura last year when it came into the southwest Louisiana area, late blooming, it's got a lot of upper ocean heat content to work with towards the higher end of the scale. You see that right here? That matches what we're seeing over here, and that was not there last year. It was warm, and that kind of proves my point that the Gulf is always warm enough. I mean, look, Laura, high-end Category 4. This, though, shows that we have higher values, especially in the central Gulf, and that gives me a little bit of concern, especially with these potentially late-blooming systems as they come in. We won't worry about it too much now, but something to certainly pay attention to. The intensity guidance is interesting. This is off of Levi's website, Dr. Cowan, the Tropical Tidbits site. Generally speaking, the guidance is very meh, M-E-H, right? Very flat. The ship's guidance is a little bit of an angle here, and that is a simple statistical, in fact, that's what it means, statistical hurricane intensity prediction. It sees things like water temperatures, wind shear, humidity, that kind of thing. A very simple statistical model. And it does, get it up to Category 2 intensity, so it's not completely flatlined in terms of the intensity guidance, but it's early. And I need to read up on what this is. You look at that and you go, yikes, but I don't know what that is. They've put new models out, so I'm not going to worry about that at the time. The general consensus is modest strengthening in terms of wind on the high side and pressure on the low side. Not much indication yet that this could get really strong, but we'll see, because it's really early in the overall process, as you know. If we start to see the overall guidance envelope trending up, I mean, this is obvious, but if more of these start going in this direction, then we'll have a little bit more concern that this could be a more wind issue as it moves to the islands and beyond. The tracks, this is the simple models for the most part. Some of these are the ensemble mean, like this orange one here from the GFS. Generally speaking, a track into the Caribbean here, into the Lesser Antilles. And remember, these are just lines showing the center. The rest of the area moving through is going to kind of look like this in terms of impacts. All of this area I'm painting in yellow, those are your impact areas. It's a large system relative to these little skinny lines that you see plotted here, which the models are picking up on some kind of a vortex or a center. Always remember that. So the whole mess is going to move across this area and bring heavy rainfall. There will be flooding issues in Puerto Rico and elsewhere. We talked about that. I'm just reiterating it. And then all of this potentially impacting the islands. But let me just give you a little bit of pause, just things to think about. I know that there will be a lot of people that will see this. They will see similar models like this that are going to get shown on television and across social media that, it's going to go across the shredder, Hispaniola, a typical ripping machine for tropical cyclones. Those mountains of Hispaniola reach high into the atmosphere, and it kind of guts out the bottom part, that low-level vorticity, and the circulation gets gutted, and then you just kind of left for the mid and upper levels if it's intact at all. And so a lot gets made of this when people see the tracks go right over the islands. Typically, that is true, when you have a very intense system to begin with. It's moving along at its best potential. Let's say a strong, well-organized hurricane. It gets the guts ripped out of it, and it's very difficult to come back. That is a true statement. When they are weak and in their formative stages like we see now, it really becomes kind of dicey, a 50-50 kind of deal. I'm just spitballing it there. And what I mean is, it's already weak. It can't get too much weaker, especially, and this is what you need to think about, if the background conditions around those islands are getting favorable all the time. If it's moving into a hostile and increasingly hostile environment, then when it runs across those islands, typically it doesn't survive much. It stays weak, it comes in weak, it stays weak, it leaves weak. When they come in very strong, the islands rip them up, and even if the environment is very good, it just takes a while to develop that inner core again. So let's throw that part out, because it's not going to be strong, in my opinion, coming in there. So the potential is, it goes over these islands weak, stays weak until it reaches better conditions farther to the west, beyond the mountains here, western Cuba, and maybe, just maybe, the Florida Straits or the southeast Gulf of Mexico, as some of this guidance is suggesting. The other alternative, and this is again obvious, just making sure you think about it, this is not gospel, as they say. This is not etched in stone. Any other metaphor you want. It could change the track. What if it goes more to the north? What if it does, a deal where it goes more to the south? And that's what Elsa did, as you recall. So we'll see. It's early. The track guidance limited right now because it's still in the formative stages, but Recon will be heading out there, no doubt. It's just a matter, I think it's going out there later today. If not today, then certainly tomorrow. And we'll know a lot more. The models will start to get a better grip on it, and we'll see how this evolves. But name storm, Fred is the next one. I think it's likely at this point, and we will be able to track it and see what it's doing a lot of various ways. And you folks down here, again, starting with Barbados, and eventually, elsewhere across the windwards and the leewards, all the way up through here to Puerto Rico, maybe farther south and west towards places like Grenada. We'll see. But as this moves through, this is your area of concern initially. We will be able to watch this. We do have some live cams that are permanent down in this region. One in San Juan that our supporter Carlos hosts for us. This is looking generally north and east from San Juan. This is over on St. Thomas. Timothy Olive hosting this camera, another one of our supporters. And this one over here in St. John from Brent, our man Brent, who comes up and helps out in person. We'll watch these tomorrow. I'll show you what these look like tomorrow as 94L or the next depression, or who knows, maybe Tropical Storm Fred moves through. But again, look at the elevation on these islands. Even Puerto Rico, you got some hilly terrain in there and gravity. That becomes an enemy because the rainfall can get focused. You get flash flooding, even eastern Cuba over here. Just reminding you of the geographic setup in the area makes this precarious, even though it is, quote-unquote, a weak developing system. No such thing as that when you're dealing with weather. All the weather matters, literally, and that's not just a saying. You got to look at the whole picture here, and that's part of my goal, is to get you to understand everything, not just the big headline-making news events of a major hurricane coming. Not everything's going to be a major hurricane, but everything does have the potential for major impacts when it comes down to you, the individual, watching on your side of the screen. All right? All right. I think we covered a lot here. I will stay on top of it. I'm on Twitter, of course, at HurricaneTrack, youtube.com/HurricaneTrack. I mean, you're watching it on YouTube, so you know that. Hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel if you're new to watching these videos, and share with your friends and family and colleagues. Get the word out about what we're doing. And of course, we are supported by the fine men and women across the world on Patreon. Patreon is a website and app that allows you to support by crowdfunding projects like this. Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. That is it for me for today. Have a great rest of your Monday. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.